involved in the renewable energy space over the past few years? And also, what are the key initiatives regarding renewables at NTPC?
Good morning. I hope I'm audible, clear. First and foremost, thanks to Renewable Watch and Mr. Alok Brar for, if I may use the word, constantly pursuing with me to get me here. So it was a nice presentation by Sabyasachi. I think he's covered a lot of things on the renewable sector per se, so I'll probably try to avoid most of those. NTPC has been technically in the renewable space for the last more than 10 years. So we were the guys who were picked up by the government of India to launch the first level of auctions, if I may say so, through our trading arm NVBN. I think that was 2012 or 13. Subsequently, NTPC was also involved in a lot of auctions going forward during the period from 2014, 15 to 16, 17, 18. 2019 onwards, we actually started focusing on building our own assets. And I actually took over this period during that period only. So I've been associated with the renewable arm of NTPC now for the last 4.5 years. What we have tried to do is that, one, we define targets for ourselves. So today, NTPC, we decided about 4 years ago that we'll actually have a renewable capacity of 60 gigawatts by 2032. And that was, if I may use the word, the KPA which has been set for me as long as I am involved with the company. From where we are today, we have NTPC has about 72 gigawatts of operational capacity, out of which about 3 gigawatts is renewable, and another 3 gigawatts is hydro. So if you may say so, the non-fossil capacity is over 6 gigawatts. But when I said 60 gigawatts, that does not include hydro. So from here, we have about another 5 gigawatts which is under construction, about another 9 gigawatts for which we've already bid out. And overall, we are working on a pipeline of close to 20 gigawatts as on date. And this 20 gigawatt is what we have already signed on, not all through tariff-based bidding, but a bulk also through the CNI base. So we have about 20 gigawatts of pipeline which we are working on, and that includes a lot of RE, RTC. I think your colleague was presenting and talking about when I heard earlier. I think you also mentioned about floating solar. So for a friend here who wanted to know about floating solar, this is where I just wanted to add to what Sabyasachi said. NTPC is the only company, I believe, who has actually commercial floating solar capacity of 262 megawatt. All the other people who are around here, maybe, I don't know, in some kilowatt range, or so I'm not aware. You can please correct me if there is any. So 262 gigawatts is commercially operational, but that is mainly on the reservoirs which we have at our power stations. We are working on another 2.5 gigawatts. This is, for example, in 2 large reservoirs in Maharashtra and UP and also DBC area. So this is by far, I understand, the largest. I agree totally with Sabyasachi. The costs are, and the floating solar is at a premium today, which is why the government is actually looking at a floating solar policy as well, which could be part of the floating solar park scheme, and I believe they've already moved the proposals with the Ministry of Finance to get the necessary sanctions. The differential, if I may say so, could vary, but roughly it's about almost 40 to 50 paise between a ground-mounted and a floating solar. So the idea of the government is actually to bridge that deficit so that it is easily sellable. And of course, on a longer-term basis, I don't know whether you mentioned about numbers, but I remember vaguely that TERI did some study a couple of years ago, and they said that the overall potential, of course, this is like unconstrained potential, so that's about 120 gigawatts of floating solar. I'm not sure how much of that is actually viable, because when we talk about dam, reservoirs, bodies, so we actually cannot cover the whole of it. So we have to cover maybe 20-30% max. We cannot cover the whole of the body. So that's on the floating solar side. Anything else? Or should I mention about? So we also have been participating in the bids. We have actually won a couple of bids on the RE, RTC and peak. So one was by Maharashtra, one was by railways. Why I'm mentioning these? Because these are different from what has been the plain vanilla solar or wind kind of bidding. So for railways, we have actually won a bid for supply of RE-RTC power at a very attractive tariff of 4 rupees 12 paisa, for which we already received the LOA. And as all the experts keep saying, that probably this is how more bidding will happen, because if you keep on just adding only solar, only wind, the issue of intermittency becomes much more acute and the grid management becomes much more important. So RE-RTC is the way to go. Another interesting bid which we won is with Maharashtra. They actually wanted peak power. So they invited bids for peak power. That also we have won. We have also tied up with C&I customers for close to 2.5 gigawatts of RE-RTC capacity, which will actually translate to something like 8 to 9 gigawatts of actual capacity on ground, because I think what your colleague mentioned, that involves solar plus wind plus storage. We invited bids for solar, for storage, and we are probably the only guy who have tied a 500 megawatt into 6 hours, so 3 gigawatt hour of storage capacity has been tied up by us. We also invited bids for another 9 gigawatt hour. So I think that broadly covers, or
Right.
I'm not talking hydrogen here because I don't know whether that was covered earlier, but we are doing hydrogen and ammonia also because that's,
My next question was
yeah,
was
okay.
on
So you can
hydrogen.
ask him.
So just what is NTPC planning in green hydrogen and green ammonia and green methanol and the derivatives?
So like any developer, I mean, it's become mandatory nowadays to talk about green hydrogen, green ammonia, because everyone feels that if you don't talk there, that means you're not doing anything useful. So yes, so we are the guys who actually started doing 2 pilots on green hydrogen. One is already commissioned, operational. That was blending green hydrogen in the natural gas. So we are doing this in the natural gas pipeline for supply of city gas in Kawas, that's a township. So it's a small pilot. Let me be very honest, we're not making any money there. That's more of a demonstration project. The other one is for running hydrogen-based buses in the state of Ladakh. We hope to get the first bus flagged off sometime this year, maybe September, October. We already placed orders for the bus. Ladakh, for the people who know, I mean, the main challenge there is that you can't work for almost 4 to 5 months. So while we had placed orders last year from around November to say mid-April, there was actually no physical activity on ground because it was all sub-zero. And so we have restarted the work there, the target. So that will be the first hydrogen-based mobility project which will take off. We are also doing the DPRs for producing about 500,000 tons of green ammonia. We're also in discussions with a couple of industries for supply of green ammonia, green methanol. One interesting project which we're doing on green hydrogen, of course, is using green hydrogen and capturing carbon dioxide to produce green methanol. So pilot we're doing at one of our stations in Vindhyachal. This for us is very important because it serves 2 purposes. It's actually a circular economy, and it helps us use the captured carbon dioxide, because that is something which the entire Western world has been pushing, that you need to do CCUS, and we have been saying CCUS is probably a difficult challenge. CCU is what we're looking at, and this is something we have highlighted there. People are very excited to know how the outcomes and the costing is. We are quite hopeful that these costs would be pretty competitive with the normal methanol prices in due course of time.
Right. And I think Mr. Singh was speaking at India Infrastructure Forum, which we did last week, and he also spoke about this green hydrogen project that is being planned at NTPC Netra as well, I think.
Yeah, so all those are pilots. Another project which we're doing at NTPC Netra is in terms of green hydrogen-based microgrid.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, just to share with you guys, so that project is almost ready. Maybe another couple of months we should be able to roll it out. But the application of hydrogen for producing power, or a microgrid, is actually much more important where the grid is not connected. And that is what we're doing. We're planning to do with Indian Army. We signed an agreement with them. The idea is to provide green power in bulk, in reliable quantities for their forward posts, which are actually not connected by the grid. So typically like in the area of Ladakh and Arunachal, where we have access to land also. So we will be doing a couple of projects with them, and if they find it useful, we are quite hopeful they'll find it useful. We'll actually scale that up further.
Right. And so most of these units will have their own captive renewable power generating stations.
The microgrids?
Yeah.
Yeah. It has to be connected directly, because we cannot be wheeling power from long away. That's the problem. Like I said, Ladakh, that is the biggest challenge. I mean, if I am able to connect with the grid, they don't need to connect with the hydrogen-based
And what
microgrid.
about the water availability?
Ladakh, that way is better. Water availability is relatively easier in Ladakh. Ladakh has vast tracts of land. It's actually a green desert, and it has almost close to 300 odd days of clear sunshine. So that way it's a much better option.
Okay. What about NTPC's initiatives in the biomass and biomass co-firing and all those initiatives that were planned?
So one of the things which we have been pursuing on our thermal side is basically that how we can green our fuel mix. So as you mentioned, biomass-based pellets was one of the opportunities. It came out of two main challenges. One, of course, is the pollution we have in Delhi. All of us face that in the months of September, October, when there's a lot of parali burning happening in a couple of the states around Delhi. So the idea is that if we can collect this parali and convert that into biomass-based pellets, and we did this exercise at one of our stations, so we found that up to 10% we can fire in our existing boilers without any modifications at all. So that was also seen by CA, government's technical arm, and finally government agreed to issue guidelines that all the thermal power stations should try and use up to 10% biomass-based pellets. So last year actually we placed order for almost 5 million tons of this. The major challenge still is that we are not able to get the required quantity in the amounts which we have ordered out, but we are hopeful that with the kind of traction we are giving to the suppliers, this will become much easier. The other one is what we were discussing earlier in the morning with Sabyasachi, is that we actually have also done another MSW to green charcoal project in Varanasi, where we are converting the municipal solid waste into coal. And we found that we can do it now. The composition of that coal is similar to any thermal coal, or better than what, if I may say, Coal India supplies to us, with much more reliability. And the cost is also maybe slightly higher than what Coal India charges, the delivered cost. So we find that this could be a major game changer for not only converting municipal solid waste, but also handling the MSW for states or cities. And we also signed MOUs, and we did this in Varanasi, we signed it with another 3 cities. So the opportunities are vast in this. If we are able to scale it up, this could be a major opportunity.
Right. And out of all the new segments that are coming up, let's say green hydrogen or offshore wind, or even CNI for MSMEs, which of these do you foresee the most potential in?
Potential, I think, is across the scale. I mean, whether it's CNI or DISCOMs, once the government has decided that we'll do 500 gigawatts of non-fossil capacity by 2030, and I'm not sure they've issued the final mandate for RPO. I understand that's going to happen anytime now. So with that 43% RPO and the commitment of many of the industrial clients to actually move over to greening their source of power, the opportunity is huge. And if you actually factor in the 2070 net zero target and the call by the Honorable PM to have energy independence by 2047, so the opportunity is huge in terms of not only the quantum of what we can do, the challenge remains in delivering that in a timely manner at the most, I would say, affordable, not the cheapest cost, at the most affordable cost, which helps the Indian economy as a whole. So as I understand, the CA has been working on what could be the potential mix of 500 gigawatts by 2030. And that is where I think the numbers are slightly different from what was presented earlier. They are talking about 430 gigawatts of solar plus wind, and which is why the government has actually rolled out this bidding trajectory also. So you do almost 50 gigawatts of bidding by 27-28, so that these projects can actually materialize by 2030, so that we're able to meet those targets. So like I shared with you, so we have already signed off on 3 large C&I projects with the customers. So there's also a lot of requirement or a hunger for green power by these corporates. Of course, everyone looks at power which is affordable for them. They obviously won't be willing to pay more for, but I think the numbers shown in the earlier presentation were quite clear. If you set up a new coal-based plant today, and if you do RE-RTC today, the RE-RTC on a longer term basis is actually quite competitive compared to that. So it's much easier now to take that decision for the corporates as well.
Talking about obligations like we have for renewables, do you feel we should have obligations for hydrogen, green hydrogen as well? I know they're not being discussed anymore. Earlier they were planned. But do you feel we should have something on the demand side?
I do think that, and this is what we have been suggesting to the government as well. I agree with you. I'm not sure what's happening now. But for creating demand at the domestic level, because the differential or the premium between grey hydrogen and green hydrogen still exists. So it's probably a good idea to have, I'm not saying very large obligations, green hydrogen consumption obligation, but definitely, particularly for some very clear industries like the fertilizer industry or the refinery industry, or going forward even for the steel industry. This will actually give a lot of support and traction to the domestic consumption of green hydrogen. So we feel that it's probably required. We, of course, leave it to the government to create that demand domestically.
Coming to the targets now, 2030, we're expecting about 500 non-fossil fuel. What do you think are going to be is it achievable, not achievable, and if not, then what are the key barriers and your suggestions to solve those problems?
Probably not right for me to give suggestions here because all those suggestions have already been given. But yes, it is achievable. I agree totally. The major challenge, of course, are the same. I mean, the biggest challenge today, if I may say so, is land and connectivity. Because the time taken for getting land, whether it's for solar, so we'll need large tracts of land. There are a few states who are best positioned, so if they are able to allot those land to the developers like us, that helps us move quickly. Connectivity has its own gestation period, and which will be required in any case. The other major challenge is the supply chain. It was mentioned earlier that government has already issued the PLI. Basis the discussions we have been having with most of these guys, because we don't understand manufacturing much. We don't see domestic supply in bulk coming in before next 2 to 3 years. But we are hopeful that this will help move away from our dependence on China and all these kind of things. So that is also very, very important. And of course, lastly, but probably the most important part is the offtake of power. While as NTPC, we have been able to do merchant capacity, we are doing more merchant capacity, so we are not actually waiting for only TBCB or PPA-based approach to developing the projects. We are actually developing projects even without that. But we understand many of these IPPs feel that PPAs are the only way to go, and probably lenders feel that it is the only way to go. But if we are looking at a market as a whole, whether it's for green power or grey power, we need to look at how people can create capacity and how lenders could look at the bankability of these projects even without a PPA. Because PPA is only one thing. Government is today talking about PPA, doing the bidding, but it does take time. So from bid to actual start of work could be anything from 10 to 12 months. So we need to move quickly, we need to move.
Right. I'll take some questions from the audience now. I'll start from my right. Any questions? Mr. Majumdar, Mr. Srivastav, any comments, any questions? Any questions in the middle column? Yes, please. So please introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Rekhansh Patil. I'm from SBI Capital Markets. I have a couple of questions.
You can ask two.
Yeah. One on the biomass pelletization, prices and the corresponding tariff. So, and government has come out with a directive that 10% of the coal consumption is to be replaced with biomass pellets. So, looking the price points, with which there is going to be a certain amount of increase in the coal-based tariffs, though it is a pass-through. But then going forward, would government phase out these, incentives? What is your view?
I think there is no incentive here. We need to remember that. So this is basically a commercial transaction.
Right.
We invited the bids. I will probably not have on me the exact prices of these, but what I understand, it's not a significant differential in terms of what the coal-based price is and what the renewable, this pellet-based price is. So I don't see why it should be phased out, because ultimately the point which I tried to convey was that this helps us green my coal-based portfolio. Today, all the power which we are producing from coal-based plants uses coal. If I replace 10% of that, that's renewable power. Theoretically, if I'm able to create, say, 40% renewable power out of this entire coal-based fleet, that's RE. That helps my storage problem, that helps my reliability issues, that helps my grid management issues. So it has to be looked in an overall context as well as pollution context. So which I said, so these were the two triggers which helped us move in this direction. So I don't see there is any incentive. So there is no tariff per se or support to any of the people for supporting this.
Right.
Yeah, one more question.
One more question.
Yeah.
Please.
About RTC, RE-RTC tariff, you mentioned that 4 rupees 12 paisa is the one with which you have entered into certain contracts. So what's the price levels you foresee 3, 4 years, 5 years down the line? Would you please?
So that's his job, and your job. So you guys prepare all these reports, and so I don't want to say something and then get being asked after 3 years that you said this and this hasn't happened. So I leave that to Sabyasachi and all these consultants who come out with these kind of wonderful reports. We do use a lot of them, let me say. It's very difficult to ask because I think you saw in the presentation earlier, tariffs 2 years ago, and we were one of those bidders, we have actually won the bid with the lowest tariff in the country at that point of time. And today the tariffs have gone up to 2 rupees 90 paisa or 2 rupees 85 paisa, whatever that number is. So that is factoring in, for example, the BCD and the input cost. There has been inflation on the other items as well. So it's very difficult to actually forecast what's that going to be. But our sense is that if we are able to get much better control on the module pricing, for example, on the solar side, and domestically, if we are actually able to come close to what the Chinese prices are, for example, there's no reason why the prices won't go down. But if that doesn't happen, I don't know. Our hope and wish is that it happens. So by that logic, the RTC price should actually see a downward trajectory with the support of all the domestic manufacturing. Similar case on the wind side. So yes, storage cost should also come down. I mean, if I have to follow what Bloomberg New Energy Finance Report says on the storage price, and they have been proved spectacularly wrong earlier, but let's hope now what they say comes out right. So that could actually lead to better battery prices.
Right. We'll take the question from the second row now.
Good morning, sir. I am Abhas Mukherjee from Terry Publications Division. I have also 2 questions from you. The first question is regarding, I just read that Jackson Green has just secured a first of its kind project on methanol synthesis facility in Vindhyachal, MP. So I want to know what is this project all about, this methanol synthesis facility, and what will be the benefits of this technology?
I think I just covered that in my remarks as well. In Vindhyachal, what we're doing is we are capturing carbon dioxide from our flue stacks. Vindhyachal, of course, is the largest power station, coal-based power station in the country, 4,760 megawatts. So from the flue stacks, we'll capture carbon dioxide. We have already set up an electrolyzer there for producing green hydrogen. So if you actually mix hydrogen and carbon dioxide, you produce methanol. So the idea is that, so the third component is the methanol synthesizer, which will actually use hydrogen and carbon dioxide to produce. So that's the methanol synthesizer, which has been won by, I believe, Jackson. So that is how we'll produce methanol. And methanol, as it is a chemical which has vast uses in applications. As I understand, almost 90% of the methanol is imported by the country. So we are able to replace that with domestic, and that to domestic green. So it's a very big opportunity for the entire methanol industry.
Also, if I may add, methanol can be converted into something like DME.
Yeah, DME is the primary use.
Basically, 1.5 tons of DME equals 1 ton of diesel. So it replaces about, in that ratio. It can be used directly as a fuel also. Yeah. Methanol can be used as a fuel also, but since its calorific value is less, it's not that easy to not that cheap to transport, store or transport. But you could convert it into DME and use it as a fuel.
In fact, that reminds me, the shipping industry is looking at methanol very closely because they can use it as a fuel, so they can replace their entire diesel fleet or the diesel generator sets which they use for the shipping industry. So many of these large shipping lines are actually talking to many of these developers like us, how they can source green methanol. So that's another large use.
Right.
Yes, sir. I think you had one more question.
Sir, I have another question on the solar PV market. We know that key sectors in solar PV are utility installations, commercial installations, and residential installations. So I want to know that on which of these sectors is NTPC focusing on, and on which sector do you feel there is most potential in residential, commercial, or utility?
I think I partly covered that. The potential is across the board. So look, when India is talking about, I'm using the word decarbonizing quite loosely here. So when we're talking about net zero, decarbonization, reducing our carbon footprint, so whether it's the utility ultimately goes to any industry or residential or agriculture. Industry directly or residential through, for example, rooftop and all those things. So I think all have a very huge scope. At NTPC, the portfolio, basically what I am handling, we are not looking at rooftop per se because we are looking at large-scale utility sources only right now. It doesn't mean I won't look at some future point of time. Right now, we are not looking at it because we feel that we have much larger basket to take care there. But yes, I think it can be done. And in fact, you missed agriculture. That's another area which government is very actively looking at because if you see, agriculture is one area where the supply cost is the most subsidized. So the government, and I think one work has been done probably in a couple of states, and I see Manuji here. So a lot of work has been done, for example, in Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat for sourcing power directly for agriculture during the daytime. So that actually helps reduce their subsidy bill also. So that's another area which is being used.
We'll take
Thank
just
you.
one more question probably. Yes, so please.
I am Dr. S.K. Dubey. I did my doctorate on conversion of methanol to petrol 40 years back. On the same lines, NTPC Vindhyachal is trying to manufacture methanol. So is NTPC also planning to convert this methanol to normal octane, which is 100% petrol?
So I think you are better placed to answer this question. He has been part of NTPC and retired a couple of years ago, and a lot of good work in the R&D side. So probably he can answer that better. As per my information, we are not doing that right now. But I wouldn't mind, and you know the Netra team in any case quite well, so probably you could help them look down that pathway as well. So.
Right. Just one last question from the left row, if there is any. Yes, we'll just take that one question and then we'll close that session. The third row from the back on the left column.
Yeah, my name is Mukesh from SBI Capital Markets. So usually we see, for the new technologies, let's say a floating solar or, any technology which is not, fully into commercial use. Generally companies might, have a challenge in raising finance. But is it true for, companies or semi-sovereign names like NTPC as well? So you all, have done a lot of pilot projects as well as commercial projects. So is, do NTPC ever felt, that even, they have any raising money issues, either from, let's say, a bond market, which is not very deep, or, other avenues? And just the second question, rough estimate on, NTPC's plans for raising money in next, let's say, 1 or 2 years.
I think you know the answer to the first part. NTPC does not have an issue with raising funds, and I hope that situation remains the same. Just for your information, all our floating solar plants are commercial plants. So these are, none of those are pilot. Pilot we did about, I think 6 years ago. That was a 1 megawatt pilot in Kawas. But today my entire fleet of 262 megawatts has PPAs, and it's PPA. No, not all of them are PPAs. In fact, we are selling about 125 megawatts on the exchange, and thankfully the going has been good so far because of the demand-supply scenario. So we don't have an issue in raising funds for any of our solar projects per se from the markets. And we are, of course, I'm not the finance guy, but my CFO is quite actively looking at all avenues of raising funds, whether bonds or long-term funds also. The other point which you raised, and I'm missing that right now, that was about? Estimate. So I think you need to keep in mind, today actually my results are coming out. So NTPC annual accounts are being finalized today, so probably not right for me to talk anything about the finance numbers because we are in that window. So only in the evening when we have the con call, after that you can get all those numbers, whatever are the estimates.
All right. Thank you.